I hired a private investigator to test my daughter-in-law so she wouldn't get close to our 10 million, and he became her lover. The night I wired the retainer to protect my son, I paid for the very man who would try to steal him from me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Savannah in late November smells like salt and pecan pie and hot iron from the shipyard. I'm Elliot Grayson, 53, widower, numbers man who keeps other men honest. My mother made me promise, on our porch swing the summer she was dying. Protect the homestead, L. Paper is how you hold a boundary. Paper and patience. That's why on November 3rd, in a glassed-in office off Bay Street, I slid a cashier's check across a desk to a licensed PI named Caleb Shore. $15,000, the amount printed in strict block letters. 2 to 3 weeks, Mr. Grayson, he said, capping his pen with a click. Discreet verification. If your daughter-in-law's clean, you'll sleep fine. His handshake was warm, his smile was competent, and the part of me that balances ledgers felt lighter. I wasn't spying out of jealousy. I was verifying the people circling a trust I administer. Phase 2, $10 million, conditioned on no deception and no diversions from the family business. Her name is Alyssa, I told him. Late 20s. Pretty charming. My son Noah thinks she sips a lighthouse. I think she sips a ship that sips seen some storms. Caleb nodded like he sips heard that 100 times. I sips'll confirm either way. 2 weeks later, he gave me an all clear. Your instincts are good, but there's no hard flag, he said over the phone while gulls screeched above the river. Work trips, gym classes, coffee with a friend named Maddie. Clean. That word clean settled over me like a blanket I wanted to believe in. Clean meant we could move forward. Clean meant I wouldn't be the villain in my son's marriage. Clean meant the trust could unlock without me looking like a controlling father who won't let go. Thanksgiving landed on a gray-blue Thursday, November 23rd. I roasted a bird for 3 hours and put my mother's white china on the table like it could hold us together. Alyssa floated through my kitchen in a black peacoat and stocking feet, humming with that curated ease she wore like perfume. Noah brought in wood for the fireplace and kissed her temple. Smells like a magazine, she told me, lifting the lid on the collards. You always do too much, Elliot. Her voice turned my name into a compliment and a challenge at once. We ate, we laughed. The oven timer dinged for the pecan pie I'd warmed, and while I got up to kill the beep, I slipped my phone under the runner and tapped record. Georgia is a one-party consent state. If I'm in the room, I can keep what I hear. I felt stupid doing it, performing my own small insurance policy against my own denial, but the need to save my son from a future catastrophe pressed squarely between my ribs. To family, I said, raising a glass of sweet tea. To honesty, Alyssa echoed, her eyes blue and bright. After dinner, on the porch, she handed Noah a craft paper sack heavy with leftovers. Take it for lunch, she said. A dot of brown gravy bled through in the shape of a heart. Thank you, I told her. You're thoughtful. She smiled as if thoughtfulness were a card she could play on command. I collected plates, let hot water roar in the sink, and listened to the room decompress. Later, over the clink of forks, the hush of the dishwasher, and a knife knocking wood. I heard it when I played the recording back, Alyssa's whisper, so close to the mic it felt like breath on the ear. I hate lying while he's right there. A man's murmur in reply that wasn't my son. Masising near. I put the phone down like it had burned me. My hands shook enough that the glass in my palm chattered against the counter. A single swallow of tea went down like a stone. Lying about what? Lying to whom? Lying with whom? I didn't storm back into the dining room. I didn't turn the table over and demand names. Paper, not fury. That was the promise. The next morning, the air was clean and cold. My truck smelled like cedar chips and last month's coffee. The leftovers bag sat in the passenger footwell where Noah must have dropped it. When I lifted it to put it in the fridge at the shipyard office, something smooth and stiff slid free and lodged in the cup holder, a hotel folio folded in thirds and sticky at one corner like it had touched a sauce cup. Seafarer Hotel letterhead, guest room 914, charges surveillance suite, $2,600, Room service, $147. Itemized 2 grilled salmons, 1 split of champagne, extra lemon, no strawberries. I underlined the totals with a dull pencil right there in the parking lot and wrote the date printed at the top in the margin again, hard as if writing it twice would make the ink tell me the truth. I could smell citrus where the paper had picked up a wedge's oil, champagne. Alyssa always claimed bubbles gave her headaches. She never ate strawberries, said the seeds stuck in her teeth. 2 salmons, a vantage point used to watch someone or to hide in plain sight. I carried the folio into my office like a live thing, closed the door, and laid it next to a yellow pad. $2,600 plus $147 $2,747. The numbers were a simple story I could hold even if the people weren't. The Seafarer is 3 blocks off the river, a place with brass rails and a lobby that smells like grapefruit rind and furniture polish. I had once booked a vendor there during a hurricane season delay. Their suites command a price because of the view. Surveillance suite, though, that code made my molars ache. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Caleb's number, then set it down again. Do not tip the man you're measuring. At lunch, Noah texted a photo of a turkey sandwich on my mother's china at his house with a heart emoji. Thanks, Dad. She takes care of me. I stared at the screen until the words ghosted. I sent back a thumbs up and a picture of the river like I was just an ordinary father with an ordinary day. Across the yard, a forklift beeped in reverse. Inside, I opened my desk drawer and slipped the folio under a stack of vendor contracts, then made a note on my pad. Seafarer, Suite 914. No strawberries, 2 salmons, champagne. Who? I wrote who twice. The pencil broke on the second pass. Even a good man wants to jump to conclusions when the math starts adding itself. But math without context is a trap. I needed context. I pulled up my own Uber history for that week and circled the rides that might pinch against the times. I looked back at my bank text alerts. No hits. The corporate Amex? I'd have to check statements in the morning. None of that would help me sleep, not with a whisper in my ear that didn't belong to my son. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the recorder again and played the Thanksgiving track through a small speaker, turning the volume down to just above nothing. I hate lying while he's right there, she'd said. The consonants were crisp, the word hate had weight. The reply was a man's low, confident murmur, hardened by distance, like a voice used to talking through doors. Not Noah's higher, eager register. Not my own gravel. I stopped the audio and listened to my house breathe. Pipes tick, the refrigerator's compressor hum, the little sounds a home makes when it is trying hard to be a safe place. The brass hook where the spare key hangs gleamed in the lamplight. It still held the key. Down on the river, a container ship moaned its slow warning and slid past like a city block going somewhere else. I thought of the trust packet in my safe. The clause I could recite by heart, no material deception, no diversion, clean, Caleb had said. Clean. I wanted to call him and read him the line about champagne and no strawberries, make him explain how a surveillance suite with 2 salmons had anything to do with protecting my son. Instead, I wrote one more line on my pad and underlined it twice. Paper over fury. Then another, do not confront, collect. In the morning, I would look for the Amex line item. I would visit the Seafarer's lobby and drink a coffee I didn't need while I watched the elevators swallow people. I would find out whether room 914's view was better for watching the city or hiding from it. I didn't know yet that a week later the brass hook would be bare, or that a tiny white AirTag on my key fob would blink an alibi. I didn't want to be true. I didn't know that his hand shook when he held a paper cup, or that her coat would make a front desk clerk remember a woman who wouldn't touch the strawberries. I only knew that I had 2 numbers, a whisper, and the promise I'd made on a porch swing to a woman I loved. Paper, patience, proof. The brass hook by the kitchen door was bare on December 5th. That hook had held the spare house key for 20 years, a little ritual of trust in plain sight. Seeing it empty hit me harder than any whisper. I stood there with my fork hovering over a plate of grits, appetite gone. My son Noah noticed. Dad, you okay? Alyssa's hand was on his arm before I could answer. He's fine, she said, voice honeyed. and Noah, still believing, shielded her. She just needs space, Dad. Stop watching everything. Space. That word cracked something in me. Space wasn't stolen keys and missing hooks. Space wasn't lies whispered over pecan pie. The next morning I met Caleb at Kudu Coffee on Liberty Street. December air was sharp, the kind that makes every exhale look like a confession. He wore a navy cap low and stirred his cup too long. Still clean, he told me, eyes flicking over my shoulder instead of at me. His paper cup trembled against the saucer. I asked why the seafarer was on my corporate statement. $2,600 plus $147 in room service. He smiled with too many teeth. Surveillance suite. Best angle on the river entrance. You want clarity, I need vantage. He said it like an invoice line. That night I drove to the seafarer's garage. December 6th, the 9:17 p.m. I wrote the time on my yellow pad. A woman in Alyssa's black peacoat stepped from an Uber and walked to the elevator with a tall man in that same navy cap. They didn't hurry, they didn't hide. They looked like two people used to entering together. I stayed in the cab of my truck and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles bleached. I didn't chase them. I didn't call my son. I wrote the detail coat, cap, time because paper is stronger than shouting. Back home, I replayed the Thanksgiving whisper through my earbuds. I hate lying while he's right there. Dish clinks. A man's murmur. Sosh, the voice coiled around my chest. I poured a glass of tea. The glass chattered against the counter as if even it couldn't steady me. On December 8th, my phone lit up with a text from Dan Roper at the bank. Unusual cash deposits flagged. Alyssa, December 7th, $4,200. My mouth dried. Second deposit 12/8, $3,500. Two deposits in 2 days. Money flowing like someone knew time was running out. I sat in my truck outside the shipyard office, heater blasting, pen biting the paper as I wrote the totals. $7,700 in 48 hours. That night, I stared at the empty brass hook again. The air felt heavy in my lungs. Collapse isn't always falling to your knees. Sometimes it's standing still, unable to lift a fork, unable to swallow food in your own house because you can taste the lies floating in it. Noah came by with Alyssa, both of them radiant with practiced normalcy. She handed me a Christmas candle to brighten the winter nights. I smiled because anger would only tip my hand. She kissed Noah on the cheek right there in front of me and said, "You've got his eyes." I wanted to scream that she didn't deserve his anything. Instead, I went to my office, closed the door, and wrote one more line on the pad. Collapse is proof's twin. One breaks you, the other saves you. I knew then if I didn't turn collapse into resolve, I would lose my son, not to her charm but to my silence. December 10th, a cold Sunday morning. I sat across from Julia Pierce in her office above Wright Square. She's a trusts attorney with eyes that measure twice before cutting once. She underlined the clause I already knew by heart. Phase 2 contingent upon no material deception, no diversion. Her pen tapped the margin. Elliot, deception isn't suspicion. It's proof. You need it entered into the trust record, quietly before anything unfreezes. On December 12th, we filed a notice of concern, sealed and witnessed. It wasn't an accusation. It was a bookmark in the family's ledger, proof that the trustee had reason to pause. Paper over fury. That evening, Aunt Ruth spread folders across her kitchen table, her lamp buzzing like an old witness on the stand. Retired court clerk, 68, and sharp as vinegar. She traced Caleb's sublease paperwork with her index finger, found the emergency contact number, and smiled. Old burner. Belonged to Alyssa in 2019. Same digits. She pushed the page toward me. Men don't tremble holding coffee unless they're drinking their guilt. I started setting traps, not illegal, not vengeful, just lawful nets to catch what was already there. December 13th, I took my own Uber history and printed the rides, matching my November and December logs to nights Caleb claimed surveillance. Circles drawn in red pen around gaps too neat to be coincidence. On December 14th, I stood in the Seafarer lobby, grapefruit rind, polish, and a front desk clerk with neat handwriting. I ordered a coffee from the kiosk and asked about loyalty points. Room 914, March 13th, 15, the clerk said, sliding me a thank you for your stay card, embossed in gold, my name on the account. I slipped it into my breast pocket, heart hammering. That suite wasn't mine, but the card said otherwise. Back at Ruth's table that night, she set out salt shakers and wooden spoons as stand-ins for witnesses. She slapped the spoon like a gavel. Cross him here, Elliot. Pin him with dates. We rehearsed, me stumbling at first, her correcting. No, say it this way, mister. Sure, were you in room 914 on March 14th? Yes or no? Don't let him dance. I wrote it down word for word. Julia called me December 15th. Elliot, subpoena prep by the 21st. We'll need metadata, affidavits, and one clean affidavit to pivot the judge. I promised her I'd deliver. At night, I sat in my office replaying the Thanksgiving whisper until my ears felt raw. Then I underlined my notes. Room 914. 2 salmons. Champagne. No strawberries. Caleb's trembling cup. Alyssa's deposits. Missing key. All lines converging on a center I could finally see. I left a message for Dan Roper at the bank. Freeze anything that smells like diversion. I shall take the blame if I set him wrong. His reply came 10 minutes later. Consider it watched. On December 16th, in my truck outside the shipyard, I pressed the AirTag's history, pings from the lot at 2:10 a.m. and 2:22 a.m. on separate nights. Someone using my keys to enter after hours. Not stealing, just photographing. Vendor folders. Inventory ledgers. Building a narrative of a controlling in-law. Paper sabotage. I pulled my son aside the next day. Shrimp and grits on the table between us. Steam rising like questions. Noah, I said, sliding the trust clause toward him. If I'm wrong and I push, I lose you. If I'm right and I do nothing, I lose you anyway. His hand hovered before he picked it up. He folded the paper once, twice, then slipped it into his jacket pocket. He didn't speak. That silence felt like the first thread of hope. By December 18th, the picture was clearer. The $28,500 wire Caleb attempted to send to a consultant sharing his hallway had been frozen by Dan. On December 20th, Ruth baited Alyssa into tea at her kitchen. She forgot a folder labeled Phase 2 Conditions on the counter. Alyssa's pupils pinched when she saw it. Ruth just sipped her tea. Paper traps, simple but effective. Every night I sat with Ruth rehearsing. Salt shaker as Caleb, wooden spoon as Alyssa. She would argue their lines, I would break them down. Dawn sep shout. Ruth warned me. The judge one set protect fury. She set protect facts. By the time Christmas lights went up on River Street, I wasn't collapsing anymore. I was planning every receipt, every affidavit, every whisper turning into a strand of rope strong enough to hold a $10 million trust in place. Resolve had replaced collapse, and resolve meant January 10th wouldn't be a disaster. It would be a reckoning. December 14th, 2:18 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The AirTag on my key fob pinged from the shipyard lot after hours, when only ghosts and thieves walk the aisles of steel. I lay there listening to the radiator click. My chest tight. They weren't stealing cash or tools. They were photographing inventory ledgers, vendor folders, shaping a narrative that I was a controlling in-law who siphoned money, paper as a weapon. On December 16th, a staffer from the Seafarer called Ruth, thinking she was still clerk of record. Room 914's guest had a strange request. She told Ruth, no strawberries on the plate. Lady said she hated them. Alyssa's allergy wasn't medical, it was preference, a quirk she paraded. Now it was burned into the memory of a hotel worker who'd never met her before. Proof often hides in details others overlook. On December 18th, Dan Roper called me at dawn. Attempted wire, $28,500 to a consultant tied to Caleb Shore's hallway address. We froze it. I sat on the edge of my bed with the blinds shut and the phone warm against my ear. Thank you, Dan, I whispered. That freeze may have saved the house. I wrote it down, December 18th, 6:47 a.m., $28,500 wire frozen. Ink is stronger than memory. That night, Noah came for dinner. Shrimp and grits, collards on the side. I fed my son like I always had, steady hands masking the storm. Halfway through, I slid the trust clause across the table. If I'm wrong, Noah, I'll lose you. If I'm right and I do nothing, I'll lose you anyway. His fork clattered onto the china. He picked up the paper and studied it. His eyes moved, but his lips didn't. He folded it and slid it into his jacket pocket without speaking. The silence wasn't rejection. It was a son realizing the storm had receipts. December 19th, I drove by Caleb's office. A narrow building off Habersham. Lights still on. Through the window, I saw Alyssa's black peacoat hanging on the rack like it belonged there. I didn't stop. I didn't storm in. I drove on, teeth grinding, because paper over fury was the only path left to justice. At Ruth's kitchen, we rehearsed again. She laid out salt shakers as judges, spoons as witnesses. Ask this Mr. Shore, who paid for room 914. Follow up, and who consumed the champagne, the salmon, the no strawberries. Ruth's voice was dry but iron. Do not let him talk around it. We practiced until midnight, her wooden spoon cracking the table like a gavel. December 20th, Ruth invited Alyssa for tea. She forgot a folder labeled Phase 2 conditions on the counter. I hid in the den, listening through the vent as Alyssa's voice dipped sharp. What's this? Ruth said nothing, sipping her tea. Paper bait, eyes reacting faster than words. Alyssa's pupils pinched. She knew the net was forming. December 21st, Julia issued a subpoena to the seafarer for guest access records linked to our corporate card. That paper trail would be a spear aimed at room 914. That night, while driving past Caleb's office again, I saw his silhouette in the window, head bent over files. The coat was gone, but my memory of it wasn't. 2 nights later, at 12:03 a.m., my phone buzzed with a butt dial. I put it on speaker. Caleb's voice, sharp with fear. Board complaints? Who tipped them? Alyssa's hiss, shut up. The line went dead. I sat in the dark, adrenaline buzzing in my veins, then saved the audio to a locked folder. I didn't confront them. I didn't call Noah, paper over fury. At 1:03 a.m., Noah knocked on my door. His eyes were glassy, shoulders bent. Dad, if she admits it, can we fix it? I swallowed hard. Truth fixes money, son. Healing's another court entirely. He nodded once, face pale, then collapsed onto my couch and slept like a child again, his chest rising and falling in the quiet of a house still holding its ground. December 22nd, the seafarer front desk clerk, T. Evans, signed an affidavit, room 914. March 14th, woman in black peacoat, no strawberries, man called Caleb. A signature in blue ink, dated and notarized. The affidavit joined the folder in Julia's office. Evidence stacked, one sheet at a time, until the tower leaned with weight. Christmas lights blinked along the river, masking betrayal in gold and green. I sat at my desk, flipping the affidavit between my fingers, and whispered to the air, "Paper is how we win, Mother, not rage paper." The trap was closing. The stage was set. Every detail, every missing key, every trembling hand, every whispered "shut up" would walk into that courtroom with me on January 10th. I wasn't collapsing anymore, I was pulling strings. December 23rd. Savannah wore a soft drizzle that made the cobblestones shine like wet coins. I woke to the sound of gulls and the steadiness that comes when a plan has more weight than panic. Paper over fury had become muscle memory. I brewed coffee, set out my yellow pad, and drew 3 columns with a ruler. Money, movement, mouths. Money was what they touched. Movement was where they went. Mouths were what they said when they thought no one listened. Money. I began with numbers I could lift. The corporate Amex statement printed the night before, line 44, Seafar Hotel, $2,600. Line 45, Seafar In-Room, $147. Same post date, March 15th. I wrote the total at the bottom, boxed it, $2,747, and underlined it twice. Then I stapled it to a clean sheet marked cashier's checks. Dan had emailed scanned copies the day prior. 2 instruments dated December 28th, totaling $9,600. Memo branding retreat. I left the space beneath them blank, ready for the bank's stamp the minute they landed. Movement. I printed my Uber logs and slid a ruler across March 14th. The time block around 9 p.m. My ride history showed I was at home that night. No out-of-house movement after 6:40 p.m. Then I wrote 2 lines beneath Caleb's arrival. 9:17 p.m. Visual and lobby observation elevator bank. Alyssa's peacoat navy cap, seafarer, garage. The page looked like the floor plan for a confession. Mouths. I wrote butt dial, 12:03 a.m., December 22nd, board complaints. Who tipped them? Shut up. Under that Thanksgiving whisper, I hate lying while he's right there. Words are currency, too. At 10:15 a.m., I walked into Julia's office with the stack. She read silently, lips pursed. We have enough for a narrow subpoena deuces tecum, she said, sliding my Amex statements into a folder. Guest ledger plus loyalty record already issued. Affidavit from T. Evans in hand. Next, PI board letter. She glanced up. I'll draft a professional conduct inquiry to the Georgia Board of Private Detective and Security Agencies. We don't need a verdict before court, just the existence of their review to impeach his credibility if he tries to skate. Paper over fury, I said. She smiled without warmth, and we keep it human. Judges are people before they are robes. On the way out, Aunt Ruth called. Stop by the courthouse annex. Clerk friend of mine owes me a Christmas favor. I found her waiting under a wreath the size of a ship's wheel, her hair tucked into a red scarf. She handed me a photocopy of a visitor log. Seafarer's off-duty security contractor, she whispered. He keeps his own notes. March 14th entry. Evening guest in black coat asked for ice. Man in navy cap called her alley, room 914. Initials FM. She tapped the initials. He'll swear to it if pressed. I tucked it into the folder like a found coin and went home. In the afternoon I played handyman at Noah's, fixing a loose hinge and pretending the world hadn't tilted. Alyssa breezed in at 4 carrying a bag of lemons and a tin of cookies. Holiday exchange at Maddie's, she said, hugging the bag to her chest. Tell your dad thank you for the candle, I told her, and she tilted her head, assessing as if a thank you were a test. Of course, she said. Her perfume was light and floral, her nails perfect, her smile practiced. On the console table a small key tray held odds and ends, loose change, a bottle opener, a house key I didn't recognize. Brass, freshly polished, no scratches on the teeth. My stomach tightened. She caught my glance and flipped the key over with a pinky. Spare for the cat sitter, she said, too fast. I didn't argue. I asked for a glass of water I didn't need, and set the empty tumbler exactly where she'd have to move it to open the console drawer. When I left, I made note of a thin smear of lemon oil on the rim. People leave fingerprints even when they wear gloves. That night, I sat with Ruth and rehearsed again. She pushed her wooden spoon gavel across the table. Sequence matters, she said. Judge Thacker will watch how you walk her from sanity to outrage. You start with the trust clause, not the gossip. She arranged the salt shakers, clause, charges, clerk, butt dial, then added a 5th, air tag. A fact isn't just a fact. It's a stepping stone. Don't jump. December 24th, Christmas Eve. The city smelled like wet pine and river salt. I stood in the Seafarer lobby again, this time with more purpose. The concierge wore a green tie with candy canes. I asked about banquet rooms for a family event, and let him talk about rates while my eyes wandered to the guest access ledger behind the counter. Names, initials, room numbers, dates. I didn't reach for it. I didn't need to. We already had a subpoena for the entries tied to our card. I just wanted the feel of the place lodged under my skin. The pattern on the carpet, the number of steps from the elevator to the ice machine, the way the brass rails cooled your hand. Courtrooms love texture when it's true. Outside. A gust lifted my coat. Caleb came around the corner with his cap low, almost walked into me, then stopped like a man who suddenly found a mirror he didn't set want. Mr. Grayson, he said, placing a palm over the smile. Holiday shopping? Always a buyer, I said. How about you? Watching anyone from above tonight? His jaw flexed. The lobby doors whooshed behind him. "I'm between projects," he said. His right hand fidgeted, half a tremor, half a tell. He pivoted like he'd been called and vanished into the gift shop without buying anything. I wrote the time on my pad in the car, 3:42 p.m. Then I wrote one more line, navy cap. Still a uniform. On Christmas morning, Noah brought over coffee and a paper sack of cinnamon rolls. We sat on my porch in our coats like two men trying to remember how a normal holiday feels. He kept touching the inside pocket where the trust clause lived. "Dad," he said, eyes on the street. "If a person lies once, will they lie again?" I wanted to say no, that people are complicated, that mercy should muscle into the room. Instead, I told him what I knew. They will lie until truth makes lying cost more. He nodded like a man counting out change. December 26th, the seafarer compliance officer, a brisk woman named Alvarez, called Julia. "We've compiled your requested records," she said. "Guest access log for room 914, March 14th, notes and A. Whitlow at 9:44 p.m., and a maintenance courtesy entry at 9:02 p.m. signed C.C. Shore. There's also a loyalty card assignment with anomalies." Julia put her on speaker. I closed my eyes and listened to the bedrock shift. "We'll need an affidavit from the clerk who made those entries," Julia said. "We already have T. Evans. We'll add Alvarez if she'll sign." Alvarez didn't hesitate. "Send a notary. I like my records clean." By evening we had 2 signed statements and a copy of the ledger page, the ink a little smudged where someone had rested a wrist. Ruth made photocopies like a woman feeding paper to a hungry fire. That night, alone at my kitchen table, I opened Alyssa's Instagram on my laptop. Public account, careful curation. I clicked a beach reel with captions, "Folly Day, March 14th. Salt hair, don't care." The metadata was a liar's tell if you knew where to look. Noah had shared access months ago when he needed help uploading a family photo. I still had the login. I clicked through the back-end timestamps, created March 12th, posted March 14th, 8:11 p.m. I took a screenshot and printed it. Caption: "Claims aren't alibis when the ocean's light doesn't match the day you swear you were there." I slipped the printout into the folder marked mouths. December 27th dawned blue and brittle. The hearing date arrived in a court notice at 9:02 a.m., January 10th. Judge Marilyn Thacker, 30 minutes allotted. "Narrow issues only," Julia said when she forwarded it. "We don't try the whole marriage. We freeze what must be frozen and force a clean lane to restitution." I wrote the date at the top of my pad and boxed it. At noon, I called Dan. "We may see 2 cashier's checks, $9,600 total, labeled Branding Retreat, date December 28th. He grunted. "I'll flag them and pull the transaction video. If it's Alyssa at the window, we'll have frame grabs. Paper over fury now with pixels." That evening, I dropped Noah back at his house after a hardware run. He fumbled his keys at the door, then turned to me like a boy on a first day of school. "Dad, if this explodes, I don't want you to hate me for bringing her in." I rested a hand on his shoulder. "Son, loving someone wrong isn't a crime. Refusing to learn after you know is." He nodded, and for a second I could see him at 5 years old, sticky with popsicle, trusting the world to be simple. He went inside. The hallway light came on. The console table gleamed. The spare key in the tray winked under the lamp. Back home, I lined everything up on my dining table like a museum installation, claws on the far left. Amex charges next. Seafarer loyalty card. T. Evans affidavit. Alvarez statement. Guest access ledger with A. Whitlow and C. Shore butt dial transcript. IG metadata print. A fresh sheet labeled cashier's checks. $9,600 with a blank box waiting for the stamps, and at the top a single brass key silhouette. I'd traced on paper as a reminder that what began as a missing hook had become a noose for lies. I took a pen and drew a thin line from each item to a single word at the center. Integrity. There was nothing dramatic left to do. The revenge was already in motion, not as cruelty, but as a boundary. The house was quiet. The porch swing creaked in the breeze. I thought of my mother's hand on my wrist, her voice clear in summer air. Paper is how you hold a boundary, I whispered into the empty room. We're almost there. Method had replaced rage. The trap had teeth, dates, signatures, amounts, and the kind of small human details that make a judge see, not just read. All that remained was to walk it into the light and let the truth cost what it must. And the light was only 2 weeks away. December 27th, the court clerk's email hit at 9:02 a.m. Hearing January 10, 10:30 a.m. Judge Marilyn Thacker, 30 minutes. Narrow issues. I printed it and slid it to the top of the stack on my dining table like a flag planted on high ground. 5 minutes later, Alyssa posted a reel with lo-fi guitar and captions about controlling men and financial abuse. Her face half-lit, haloed by a string of fairy lights. I watched it once without sound, then again with. She was building a story in public so the courtroom would feel like a correction instead of a revelation. Narrative is its own kind of currency. I opened my yellow pad and wrote a single sentence. We do not argue feelings with a judge. We argue facts that force feelings to follow. At noon, Julia called. I want to sharpen the lane, she said, voice tight. We're not litigating marriage. We're protecting the trust and the company. The ask is simple. Freeze phase 2. Restrict unusual transfers. Compel reimbursement and preserve evidence. The rest can happen in mediation later. Understood. Bring the paper that breathes, she added. The steno strawberries sifted the trembling cup. The butt dial, fax with pulse. At 4:10 p.m., Dan texted me a heads up. Expect 2 cashier's checks tomorrow. Likely $9,600 total. Label branding retreat. I'll pull window video and copy the instruments. I replied with a thumbs up. I didn't feel. December 28th. The air had that wet cold Savannah carries like a habit. I parked nose out in the bank lot and waited. At 11:42 a.m., a winter white sedan pulled in. Alyssa stepped out in a camel coat, hair braided tight, sunglasses despite the gray. She went inside with a manila folder tucked against her chest. I didn't follow. I watched the security glass hold the world apart. 15 minutes later, she came out lighter by 2 sheets of negotiable paper. Dan called me at 1:07 p.m., confirmed 2 cashier's checks, $5,100 and $4,500. Memo on both branding retreat. We have countercam and teller stamps. I'll courier copies by 5. I wrote the numbers, boxed them. $9,600 total, and underlined once. Underneath I wrote in smaller script. Retreat from what, exactly? Paper, not fury. That evening Noah showed up with 2 coffees, and the look of a man trying to spread himself across a fault line. She says you such punishing us. He blurted before the door had fully closed, that this is about you not letting go. I motioned to the table. Sit. He did, but he didn't touch the coffee. I pushed the Amex page toward him. Then the Seafarer ledger with A. Whitlow, 9:44 p.m. Room 914, and the maintenance entry C. Shore. 9:02 p.m. I added the IG metadata print showing created March 12th, posted March 14th, 8:11 p.m. Dad, you can argue for her, I said softly. Ruth and I have been rehearsing cross. Give me your best. He took a breath and picked up the roll like he'd been waiting to. The champagne could be for the PI work expense. The coat, everyone has a black coat. The butt dial could be taken out of context. The deposits, holiday money from her aunt. The cashier's checks, planning a retreat for her brand. I listened without flinching, then laid down the no strawberries detail. The staffer note, the affidavit from T. Evans, the trembling cup at Kudu, and the AirTag pings at 2:10 and 2:22 a.m., 2 after-hours entries. Noah, I said, tapping the times. No theft. Photographs. Vendor folders. Inventory ledgers. That's not brand planning. That's framing. He pressed his palms into his eyes until color swam. Dad. His voice came out shredded. When he lowered his hands, he wasn't acting anymore. I brought a fox into our henhouse. He let the words hang there. Then he reached for the coffee like a man asking a small mercy from himself. December 29th, a small domestic miracle. The brass hook in Noah's garage had a key on it again. brass gleaming, freshly wiped, teeth too clean. Found it behind the dryer. Alyssa joked when I glanced at it. Silly me. The humor didn't reach her eyes. I excused myself to the bathroom, toggled the AirTag app out of habit, and saw the history again. December 14th, 2:18 a.m. and December 21st, 2:24 a.m. movements at the shipyard lot. I took a screenshot, dated it in the corner with a pen when I printed it later, and slid it under movement in the stack. That afternoon, Ruth set out her salt shakers and wooden spoon gavel like a traveling courtroom. Again, she said. Tight, I outlined the sequence like stepping stones across cold water. Clause charge lege affidavit butt dial AirTag cashier's checks. Ruth nodded. Now your ask, she prodded. Injunction continuing as to Phase 2. I recited, restrictions on unusual transfers. Preservation order on devices. Schedule for restitution hearing on the $12,347, $2,747. Seafarer charges plus $9,600 cashier's checks. We explicitly separate the frozen $28,500 attempted wire. It remains outside restitution math, but squarely inside credibility. She smacked the spoon like a gavel. Good. Less preacher, more accountant with teeth. She then played defense. Mr. Grayson, aren't you just a bitter widower with control issues? She asked, channeling an attorney I'd yet to meet. I smiled without humor. No, may situm. I situm a trustee meeting the clause as written. Deception voids Phase 2. Diversion is colorable from the company account. The paper speaks. Again, she said, and we ran it until my throat tasted like copper and the lines clicked in place. Not as theater, but as muscle. That night, my phone buzzed with a DM from Alyssa. Lift the hold and we'll talk. I stared at the 5 words until they blurred. My reply was the smallest sentence I could construct around steel. Talk starts at truth. December closed like a fist, then opened on New Year's Day with a salt clarity sky. I drove to Bonaventure Cemetery with a thermos and the folder on the passenger seat. The path was damp, leaves plastered to the ground like pressed coins. I brushed pine needles from my mother's stone and sat on the low wall facing the river bend. Proof over fury, I said out loud, as if answering a question she'd asked years ago. I'm keeping the house without burning it. A gull looped and the river moved like a habit no storm could cure. Back home, a voicemail from Julia waited. Opposing counsel requesting mediation before the 10th with a gag clause attached. I declined. We'll see them in court first, then we can talk settlement with your leverage intact. I saved the message in a new folder. Court, Thacker, Prep. January 2nd, Dan's courier handed me the photocopies of both cashier's checks, teller stamps, printed dates, and a blurry frame grab showing Alyssa at the counter, head bowed, pen in hand. I added them to money, and wrote a running subtotal across the bottom edge like a caption, $12,347. Disputed to be reimbursed. I resisted the urge to highlight it in yellow. Judges don't need neon, they need integrity. January 3rd, Ruth and I rehearsed in a different key. She found an old metronome and set it ticking soft. Pace is a kind of persuasion, she said. You're not here to drown the court. You're here to give it a path. Tick. Leave air after each exhibit so the judge can decide she's learning. Tick. I practiced pausing after each piece of paper. The empty beats felt like the moments right before a swing lands true. January 5th. Alyssa's attorney filed a short brief about intrusion into seclusion. Julia forwarded it with a single line. Georgia one-party consent. Your Thanksgiving recording is admissible. We slotted it as context, not centerpiece. Do not lead with it. I wrote that in red context, not centerpiece. The butt dial stayed in the same bucket. Context that punches credibility without trying the marriage. January 7th, I ironed a blue shirt and set out my suit. An old ritual like laying tools on a bench before a repair. Noah texted, I'm coming to court. I won't sit with her side. I stared at that sentence a long time. I typed and deleted 3 drafts, then wrote, sit where you need. I'll be there either way. He replied with a thumbs up and nothing more. Sometimes love is giving someone the lane they need to get to you. January 8th, I walked the Seafarer block, one last time, not for evidence but for nerve. The brass rails were cold even through my glove. In the gift shop window, a stack of grapefruit-scented candles waited for tourists who wanted to take the lobby home. I didn't go in. January 9th, the house felt impossibly clean. The spare key hung on its hook. The stack on my dining table had lost its chaos and become a single breathing thing: clause, charges, ledger, affidavits, butt dial, AirTag checks, a diagram of truth's cost. I slid each page into a fresh sleeve, then closed the binder and sat with it like a man holding a sleeping child, heavy, fragile, and worth everything. That night, I slept. Not well, not long, but without the old choking. At 2 a.m. the AirTag did not ping. The river moaned its slow baritone. Somewhere in the city, a woman who hated strawberries rolled over and checked a phone for a message that wasn't coming. Morning would be January 10th. Judge Thacker's courtroom. 30 minutes that would drag an entire season into daylight. I placed the binder by the door, set my shoes beneath it, and turned off the lamp. Paper over fury. Proof over fear. Boundary over burn. Tomorrow we stop telling the story and let it tell itself. The courthouse smelled like old books and lemon cleaner, the kind of antiseptic honesty you can only fake for so long before truth bleeds through. Judge Marilyn Thacker's nameplate sat square on the bench, brass catching the winter light. 10:30 a.m., 30 minutes, narrow issues. The gallery was half full. Tuesday faces a bailiff with soft eyes, a reporter checking her phone, two strangers who smelled like last night's cigarettes and somebody else's soap. I sat at counsel table with Julia and my binder, each page in its sleeve like an exhibit at a museum of hard lessons. Noah slipped into the second row on our side, head down, hands clasped. He didn't look at Alyssa when she entered in a cream blouse and that black peacoat. She sat with her attorney, a polished man with a navy tie and a pocket square, the color of fresh bruises. Caleb arrived last, clean-shaven, navy cap in his hand, jaw tight. His eyes grazed mine, then slid away like a guilty tide. "All rise," the bailiff said. We stood. Judge Thacker stepped in, black robe, hair pulled back in a practical twist, face that had no time for theater. "Good morning. We are here on Grayson Trust. Phase 2, docket 24 JT 110, she said. Petitioner seeks a continued injunction regarding distribution and restrictions on certain transactions and reimbursements. 30 minutes total. Petitioner first. Julia stood, smooth as a blade. May it please the court, Julia Pierce for trustee Elliot Grayson. Our ask is simple and within your equitable powers. Maintain the freeze on Phase 2 of the trust. Restrict unusual transfers from the company operating account. Compel reimbursement of $12,347 to the company, and preserve relevant evidence. We are not trying a marriage. We are protecting an instrument with a condition: no material deception, no diversion." Opposing counsel rose slowly, one palm up like a TV pastor. "Your Honor, David Kell for respondent Alyssa Whitlow Grayson. This is about a controlling father-in-law waging a private war under the guise of fiduciary duty. He recorded Thanksgiving dinner for heaven's sake. He hired a PI to stalk a young woman. This is punishment dressed as prudence." "Noted," Judge Thacker said, eyes moving to me and then back to Julia. "Let's hear the paper." Julia nodded and touched my forearm, cueing me. I stood, opened the binder, and felt the weight of my mother's porch swing in the hinge. "Your Honor," Julia said, "we begin where the trust begins. Its condition, Exhibit A." She placed a single page on the evidence ledge. Clause Th, Phase 2, contingent upon no material deception, no diversion. 14-point font. Highlighted where it matters. Judge Thacker read, lips barely moving. "Proceed." "Exhibit B," Julia said. Corporate American Express statement. Line items March 15th. Seafarer Hotel, $2,600. Seafarer Inn Room, $147. Total $2,747. These charges were coded by a private investigator as the surveillance suite. Kell slid forward. Objection to relevance. Even if a PI used a room, What sips the nexus to deception? This is surveillance cost, not diversion. Overruled for now, the judge said. I selt here the chain. Exhibit C, Julia continued, setting down a small stack. Seafarer loyalty assignment card, Mar 13, 15, tethered anomalously to Mr. Grayson's account, not by his request. Guest access ledger, subpoenaed and authenticated, March 14th, maintenance courtesy entry at 9:02 p.m., signed C. Shore. At 9:44 p.m., guest entry A. Whitlow to room 914. Affidavit from front desk clerk T. Evans, woman in black peacoat, no strawberries request. Man called Caleb. Kelsip's pen clicked once, nervous somewhere beneath his polish. We dispute the identification, he said. Black coats are not rare. Seta is not seta, and this reeks of hearsay. Clerk affidavit is sworn. Julia replied, calm, and we have more than coats. She lifted a single photo, nothing tabloid, just a screenshot with a timestamp. Exhibit D, Instagram backend metadata for respondents March 14th, Folly Beach post created March 12th, posted March 14th, 8:11 p.m. Alibi claimed is a post, not a presence. The beach light in the clip does not match March 14th's tide chart, a detail we will spare the court because we don't need it. The ledger and affidavit suffice. Judge Thacker looked over her reading glasses. Mr. Kell, you can cross the clerk if you wish, but the authentication looks clean. Kell called up his poise. We selt reserve cross, Your Honor. Julia shifted to the next stone. Exhibit E, AirTag activity from Mr. Grayson's key fob, December 14th and 21 to 18 a.m. and 2:24 a.m., pinged at the shipyard lot after hours. No theft, but internal photos of vendor folders and inventory ledgers appeared thereafter, consistent with an effort to construct a narrative of mismanagement. We are not putting on that case today. We are showing motive tied to the diversion. She laid down two small prints, faint gray maps with dots in the lot. The judge's eyes narrowed the way eyes do when truth and trickery both knock at the same door. Exhibit F, Julia said, tapping the money tab. Two cashier's checks dated December 28th, totaling $9,600. Memo line branding retreat drawn from the company's operating account. We have counter video stills of respondent at the teller window. That is diversion, Your Honor, company funds for a personal brand. Combined with seafarer charges, the reimbursement request is $12,347. Kell lifted his chin. The T-Brandest is our client Sips's commercial activity attached to the family Sips's storefront. She Sips's building value. Retreats build brands. Then they can be funded by her, not by the company, Julia said. Exhibit G, Dan Roper's freeze memo. The attempted wire of $28,500 on December 18th to a consultant connected to Mr. Shore's hallway address. We're not asking the court to count that amount in restitution, only to weigh it in credibility and the need for continued restrictions. Judge Thacker scribbled on her legal pad. Noted. Keep going. Exhibit H, Julia said, changing tone almost imperceptibly. A brief, certified transcript of an accidental call recorded on December 22nd, commonly called a butt dial. Mr. Shore's voice, board complaints. Who tipped them? Respondent's voice. Shut up. We introduce this not as centerpiece but as context that the investigator understood his exposure, used only to impeach credibility. Kell tried to make his mouth a straight line and couldn't quite get there. Your Honor, this is grubby. Blots of life is, the judge said. I settle admit it for the limited purpose stated. Julia's last stone was the one with teeth. She lifted a letter and handed a copy to Kell. Exhibit a letter from the Georgia Board of Private Detective and Security Agencies acknowledging receipt of a complaint and opening a fraternization review regarding Mr. Shore's conduct on this case. We are not seeking a finding here. We are showing the court why the word surveillance on a seafarer folio is not the shield counsel imagines. Kell stood and adjusted his pocket square, as if that could iron the facts. We shall take that witness now, he said. Mr. Shore. Caleb walked to the stand, right hand raised, oath spoken too smoothly. He sat like a man trained to make chairs respect him. Mr. Shore, Kell began, warm and leading. You were hired on November 3rd by Mr. Grayson to ensure his daughter-in-law was who she said she was. Did you perform surveillance consistent with your license? I did, Caleb said. Professionally, discreetly. Room 914 at the Seafarer, was that used to obtain vantage points and protect client assets? It was, he said. It sits called a surveillance suite because the line of sight to the river entrances is ideal. Kell turned, satisfied. No further questions. Julia rose. Her voice had that particular Savannah Steele honey only on the first sip. Mr. Shore, let sips respect the court sips time. Yes or no when it will do. You signed for a maintenance courtesy entry SIPSID at 9:02 p.m. on March 14th into room 914, correct? He blinked. I may have. Exhibit C, page 2, Julia said, tapping the ledger. Your initials, CS. Yes. At 9:44 p.m., did a guest named Thea Whitlow sit access the same room? I wouldn't know. The ledger says yes. He swallowed. That's what it says. You ordered room service that night? I don't recall. Julia slid the folio onto the ledge. 2 grilled salmons, extra lemon, split of champagne, Seto strawberries, aspet. You consumed those alone. Silence made a sound. I didn't say that. So there was someone with you. He shifted. I sometimes have an associate debrief. Is her name Alyssa? Julia asked. Kell leapt. Objection. Overruled. Answer. Caleb Sitch's jaw worked. I once said answer that without counsel, Sitch's advice. You have counsel, Judge Thacker said, almost gently. You set her answering now. Caleb looked at the navy cap crumpled in his lap like he wished it were a cave. I was unprofessional. I met with the subject, briefly. During an active investigation you were paid to conduct. Julia said, not a question, and you charged the family business to do it. He stared at the folio as if he could will the ink to evaporate. Julia moved to the next stone. You start familiar with the Georgia Board SIPS fraternization standards? Yes. You received a letter last week indicating an inquiry had opened. His mouth formed a dry smile that had no joy in it. I did. No further questions, Julia said, and sat. Kell tried to revive him on redirect with words about professional discretion and necessary proximity, but the room had already decided what the room had decided. The bailiff's soft eyes didn't blink. Respondent? Judge Thacker asked. Do you wish to testify? Alyssa stood, smoothed her blouse, and walked to the stand like a dancer hitting her mark. She raised her hand, swore, sat, and looked directly at the judge. Mrs. Whitlow Grayson, Kell said, soft as a hymn. Are you being punished for being a modern woman in a traditional family? I am, she said. I came from less. I am proud of building my brand. Elliot hates that I done set need him. Julia didn't Esther rise. She didn't set need to. She simply set the 2 cashier SEPS checks where the judge could see the memo lines. Mrs. Whitlow Grayson, the judge said herself. Those funds, $9,600, came from the company account. Why? Alyssa Sett's lashes dipped. We had a planned retreat. I fronted costs. With company funds, the judge said. It's a family business, she answered, brightness fading. Family helps family. And the seafarer? The judge asked. Tone even. 2 salmons. A split of champagne. Thino strawberries. Thino soap sipture, used by a PI who entered at 9:02 p.m., and whose board has now opened a fraternization inquiry. Help me draw the Thie family Sipley line there. Alyssa's mouth settled into the shape of a truth she would not speak. I don't know about any fraternization. Thank you, the judge said. You may step down. The courtroom inhaled. Counsel, Judge Thacker said, looking at both tables. I heard enough for today. She leafed once more through the clause, then the ledger, then the checks, then looked at me. Mr. Grayson, whatever one thinks of your methods, you brought me paper, not just feelings. She set her pen down. Ruling the injunction on Phase 2 remains in full force as to Respondent Alyssa Whitlow Grayson. The trust will not distribute pending further order. The court imposes temporary restrictions on unusual transfers from the company operating account. Respondent shall reimburse the company $12,347 within a schedule to be set, $2,747 for seafarer charges, and $9,600 for cashier's checks labeled branding retreat. The attempted $28,500 transfer is noted solely for credibility. It is not included in reimbursement. Both parties shall preserve all relevant evidence, including devices, accounts, and metadata. We will set a status in 30 days to confirm compliance and, if necessary, mediation terms. Mr. Shore, your board inquiry is your problem. This court uses it only as credibility context. Kell stood, straining for air. Your Honor, a gag order. No gag order, she said, but I strongly suggest you let the paper work and stop posting about feta-controlling men. Scepter, court adjourned. The gavel tapped wood. It was not loud. It didn't have to be. Alyssa whipped toward Noah in the second row, eyes bright as broken glass. You did this, she hissed. He stood slowly, hands calm at his sides, and for once he looked like a man who understood that love is not an alibi. No, he said quietly. The paper did. Caleb slid past me on his way out, the navy cap in his fist. He didn't meet my eyes. Outside the courtroom door, I heard the low murmur of a reporter asking for comment, and the higher click of someone's bad decision about to be typed. Julia closed our binder and exhaled. We asked small and got everything we needed, she said. Injunction, restrictions, reimbursement, lane, preservation. The house holds. I looked at the empty space where the judge had been and thought of a porch swing in summer. Paper over fury, boundaries in ink. The room felt lighter and heavier at once, like forgiveness thinking about walking in, but deciding to wait until the receipts clear. In the hallway, Noah finally looked at me full on. Dad, he said, voice raw, what happens now? Now we make the money honest, I said. The rest we let time decide. Downstairs, the winter sun bounced off the courthouse steps. The brass on the door was cool under my hand, the same temperature as the rails in the seafarer lobby, the same as the lettered plate on Judge Thacker's bench. I held it a second longer than I needed to, then let go. Justice didn't feel like a trumpet. It felt like paper, warm from someone else's hand, cooling in mine, and finally still. January 12th, 2 days after the ruling, Savannah carried a damp chill that crept into bone and paper alike. The courthouse transcript hadn't even cooled before the first ripple hit. The Georgia PI board marked Caleb Shore under review, posting it on their internal circular. By noon, 2 firms he contracted with paused his assignments. Paper follows faster than whispers when a board letter has teeth. Julia called me that afternoon, her voice clipped but satisfied. We've secured preservation orders on the devices. If Alyssa deletes, it's contempt. If Caleb spins, it's obstruction. For now, we hold. I wrote it in the margin of my pad. Hold is victory too. That night, Noah moved into my spare room with 2 duffel bags and silence. He sat at the kitchen table, chewing slowly, then pushed his plate away. If you never tested her, he asked, would this have happened? His eyes were raw, voice breaking at the seam. I poured him tea and didn't answer right away. The match didn't make the gasoline, I said finally. He nodded once, eyes shining, and went to bed. His duffels stayed by the door like refugees waiting for a ruling of their own. January 13th. Ruth dropped off a pie and an extra copy of T. Evans's affidavit, expanded now with a timestamp block showing room 914's entries in sequence. She tapped the page with one red fingernail. This clerk wanted to be sure the court knew she remembered the no strawberries detail. People like clean records. Ruth winked, and people like pie. I filed the affidavit under affidavits, expanded, and served slices to Noah, who ate in silence, fork scraping china like a clock. The next day, Alyssa DM'd me from a new account with no followers. Lift the hold and we'll talk. I stared at the words, then typed back. Talk starts at truth, no more. I archived it, paper or silence. Nothing between. January 14th, Julia called again. They want mediation with a gag clause. Hush the affidavits, bury the board letter, wrap the checks. I said no. Her voice was ice. We don't bury what the court already aired. I wrote January 14th mediation offer declined in my ledger. Next to it, I underlined a single word, transparency. That evening, Noah broke his silence. He sat across from me, hands clasped. She says she can explain. His voice cracked. But I can't unhear her saying, "Shut up on that butt dial, Dad." And I can't unsee my name in her eyes when Judge Thacker read those charges aloud. His throat worked. And then he whispered, "I wanted to believe love meant she'd stay." I reached across the table, set my hand on his, and told him the only thing paper can't hold. Love without proof makes clay. Proof without love makes stone. We choose what we fire in the kiln. January 15th. Alyssa's attorney floated settlement terms again. Reimbursement stretched over 24 months, disqualification from Phase 2 in writing, plus a gag. Julia texted, "She's cornered. Don't gloat, just let the paper do the punishing." I looked out at the river, tide swelling like the house's own breath, and whispered, "Paper over fury, still." By January 17th, mediation finally opened. A rented conference room at a neutral law office, blinds buzzing faintly from the HVAC. Alyssa sat across from me, makeup precise, voice pitched for sympathy. "This is all misunderstandings," she said, palms flat on the table. "I never took anything that wasn't for us." Julia answered without raising her tone. "The ledger says otherwise. The cashier's checks say otherwise. The Amex charges say otherwise. The attempted wire says otherwise." Each word dropped like a coin in a jar. The room filled with weight. Alyssa's counsel shuffled papers. "We can agree to reimbursement, Your Honor," he said toward the mediator. $12,347 over 18-24 months. She disclaims Phase 2 benefits, relinquishes voting rights claims. Caleb signs a statement of inappropriate contact. In exchange, confidentiality, no board complaints, no affidavits waived in public. Julia leaned forward. "We will not gag truth. What has been entered into record stays in record. What was sworn stays sworn. We'll accept reimbursement schedule and disclaimers. We'll accept his admission letter to the board, no gag clause." The mediator looked at Alyssa. She folded her hands, then unfolded them, eyes darting to Noah. He stared at the table, jaw clenched, saying nothing. On January 20th, Judge Thacker incorporated the mediated terms into order. Reimbursement formalized, injunction permanent as to Alyssa, voting rights relinquished. Caleb's signed statement went to the board. "I admit inappropriate personal contact during active investigation." One line that would haunt his license longer than any fine. The $10 million remained protected. The house remained whole. Fallout has a sound. It's not shouting. It's not breaking glass. It's the hush of a phone that no longer rings with false promises. The silence of a key finally left on its hook. It's the sound of a son exhaling at the dinner table, realizing the roof still holds. By the end of January, Alyssa moved out of Noah's house into a furnished rental near Victory Drive. Caleb's office light went dark, his name replaced by a "for lease" sign. Noah stayed in my spare room, duffels slowly emptying into drawers. He still didn't talk much, but he sat with me on the porch. Swing some nights looking at the river, both of us listening to the city breathe. The trust was safe. The company was safe. The house was safe. And yet, sitting there under the Savannah night sky, I knew the paper hadn't saved everything. Paper had boundaries. It didn't heal wounds, but boundaries were enough for now. January 17th, Mediation Day. The blinds in the neutral law office hummed with HVAC breath, rattling faintly like an old metronome. The table was oak, the coffee stale, and the chairs too soft for the weight of what sat on them. Alyssa crossed her legs, cream skirt immaculate, voice measured. Her attorney leaned in like a man shielding a candle from wind. Across from them, Julia set our binder down with the calm of a surgeon placing tools. The mediator opened with the ritual. "We're here to resolve narrow issues, reimbursement, trust rights, operating account restrictions. Speak in good faith." His voice was even, practiced neutrality. Alyssa spoke first, a quaver hidden beneath polish. "This is all misunderstandings. I didn't stake anything. I was building a brand, investing in family future. Elliot twists paper into punishment. I let Julia answer. She didn't raise her tone. She simply opened the binder and slid the first exhibit forward. March 15th, MX statement. $2,747. Room 914 and room service. Charges marked to the company. She slid the next, December 28th, 2 cashier's checks. $9,600 total. Memo line branding retreat. Drawn from the company's operating account, video stills show Mrs. Whitlow Grayson signing at the teller window. She tapped the subtotal written across the bottom, $12,347. Silence weighed the table. The mediator nodded, pen ticking. Ellicot's counsel cleared his throat. We start prepared to acknowledge the funds and schedule reimbursement. 18 to 24 months. She maintains these were business development expenses but agrees to repay in full. Julia slid one more page across. In addition, Phase 2 of the Grayson Trust remains frozen. As to Mrs. Whitlow Grayson, she formally disclaims all rights to distribution, present and future, and relinquishes any voting claims in the family company. That SEP's non-negotiable. The attorney stiffened. Alyssa's lips parted, eyes darting to Noah in the corner. He sat silent, gaze fixed on the table grain, not on her. His stillness was the loudest answer in the room. Finally, Alyssa exhaled. Fine, she said, the word flat. The mediator wrote, pen scratching, reimbursement $12,347 over 18-24 months. Disclaimers, trust benefits and voting rights relinquished. Julia wasn't set finished. She slid the final exhibit forward, a single letter already signed, bearing Caleb Sepp's name, and Mr. Shore admits inappropriate personal contact during active investigation. His statement has been forwarded to his board. It joins the record. Alyssa's hand twitched. Caleb, sitting at the far end of the table, jaw clenched, said nothing. His signature already carried the weight of a guillotine. The mediator gathered the pages, nodding. Agreement reached. Judge will incorporate into order. 3 days later, January 20th, Judge Thacker did just that. Her ruling was crisp, voice slicing clean. The court incorporates mediated terms. Respondent shall reimburse $12,347. Respondent disclaims Phase 2 trust benefits and voting rights. Injunction remains permanent. All unusual transfers restricted. Board statement acknowledged. The gavel tapped. It was over. Over in paper, at least. Noah and I walked out into the savannah air, cold, biting at the edges of relief. He looked younger and older at once. Duffel bag eyes still carrying weight. Dad, he said, voice low, I can set believe she signed. She didn't sign for us, I said. She signed because paper costs more than lies when a judge reads it. He nodded, quiet, and we walked to the truck. Justice didn't come with a parade. It came with lines on an order, signatures that turned whispers into reimbursements, and the silence of a trust staying whole. The $10 million remained safe. The company, safe. The homestead, safe. My promise to my mother held, not by anger but by ink. A week later, Julia dropped off the certified copies. Heavy white paper with raised seals, the kind that outlives memory. Frame 1, she joked. Or lock it in your safe. I chose the safe. Paper is best where thieves can't reach. Caleb's letter made its way to the PI board. Word spread quick. Firms froze his contracts. One issued a public note, pending review of license conduct. Alyssa moved out of Noah's house, taking only clothes and her curated smile. The neighbors whispered, but whispers no longer mattered. At night, I sat with Noah on the porch swing, thermos between us, river black under the stars. He broke silence first. She told me once she hated lying while you were right there. His voice was brittle. Turns out she hated getting caught. I set my hand on his shoulder. Paper caught her. You just didn't close your eyes. He nodded, then leaned back, exhaling like a man finally empty enough to breathe again. Justice wasn't cruel. It was boundary. It was the math that balanced when lies were debited and truth credited. $12,347 reimbursed, $10 million preserved, a family ledger marked clean, and me a widower still sitting in the house my mother made me promise to protect. By February, the marsh grasses were starting to green again, a quiet reminder that winter doesn't get the final word in Savannah. I kept the binder locked in my office safe, its label written in black ink. Family, proof. On the last page, I left an empty sleeve, a deliberate white space. Not every story needed to be filled. Some endings are best left unwritten. One evening, Noah and I walked the pier at sunset, the river catching gold like spilled coins. He had the look of a man unburdened but not yet rebuilt. "Dad," he said, voice steady but soft, "I keep asking myself if I ignored the signs because I didn't want to lose her, or because I didn't want to admit you might be right." I paused, leaning on the rail, the tide slapping wood. "Being right isn't set the victory, son. Keeping the house whole that sets the win. Truth doesn't set compete with love, it measures it." He nodded, watching the gulls wheel. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "we learn to live with boundaries. The trust is safe, the company steady. Healing takes longer." At night, I would sometimes open the safe, touch the binder spine like a relic, then close it again. The receipts, affidavits, screenshots, all there, sleeping. Proof over fury, paper over fire. Ruth came by with sweet tea one afternoon, sat in my kitchen with the air of someone who knows what storms feel like after they set past. "You honored your mother Sep's house," she said, folding her hands. "Without burning it down, not many men pull that off." I smiled faintly. "It never felt like winning." "It wasn't supposed to," she replied. "It was supposed to be enough." Julia called a week later, her tone softer than usual. "The board accepted Caleb's admission. His license is suspended pending full review. He won't be hired in Georgia for years. If ever," she hesitated, then added, "Alyssa's counsel floated one last olive branch confidentiality clause in exchange for a lighter repayment schedule." I said no, we don't gag truth. "Good," I said. We Seb had enough silence. On February 10th, Noah came home late and found me on the porch swing. He held 2 beers and offered one. "She texted me," he said after a long silence. "Said I'd regret siding with you. Said love is bigger than paper." He took a swallow, eyes on the river. "But love without proof is just clay, Dad." "I get that now." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Clay can crumble, stone holds. You choose what you fire in the kiln." He laughed once, bitter but clean. "You and your metaphors." I laughed too, the sound more human than I expected. "That one sip's yours to carry." Later that night, as I locked up, I thought of Alyssa somewhere in the city, telling someone else a version of herself, polished smooth. I thought of Caleb stapling together whatever was left of his career. I thought of the $10 million trust still sealed, waiting for honest hands. And I thought of my mother's voice on that porch swing so many summers ago. "Paper is how you hold a boundary." We had honored the house without burning it. That was enough. The next Sunday, Noah and I walked through Bonaventure again. He stopped at his grandmother's stone and laid a single daffodil. "I almost lost it all," he whispered. "But we kept it." I stood beside him. Silence, my amen. Justice, I realized, wasn't thunder or applause. It was a boundary written in ink, a house still standing, a son still beside me. Before we continue, I said to myself, thinking of the channel that carried this story into ears I never see, please subscribe and tell us where you are listening from. Then, softer, to the stone, to the river, to the night air. "Love without proof makes clay. Proof without love makes stone. Choose to be fired, not frozen. And remember," I let the words linger, the tide answering like breath, "you didn't lose me, you gave me away." April rolled in with soft rain that turned Victory Drive into a mirror of gray sky and neon signs. By then, court orders had cooled into routine. Alyssa had vacated Noah's house, her things gone except for a single hairpin found under the couch. Caleb's office was shuttered, blinds pulled, a for-lease notice taped crooked in the window. Justice had done its work on paper. Life was doing the rest. One morning, I stopped for coffee at a strip mall cafe off Victory, the kind of place where the espresso tastes faintly of burnt toast, but the chairs are warm. At the counter, waiting for her order, was Alyssa. She wore a blazer too stiff for comfort and carried a binder embossed with the logo of an insurance firm I'd passed 100 times. Her eyes flicked to me, then away, settling instead on the pastry case. On the break room table behind her, a fruit bowl sat with bananas, apples, and a handful of strawberries. She avoided them just like always. Some tells don't fade even when the stakes do. I didn't speak. Neither did she. Justice had already had its say. Words now would just be echoes. Outside, under the cafe awning, I saw Caleb, no longer in tailored jackets. Just a windbreaker and jeans, stapling flyers to a corkboard that leaned against the wall. The papers flapped in the breeze. Independent legal research. Affordable, discreet, confidential. No license number. Just a phone scribbled in bold marker. His hands shook as he smoothed the corners. The same tremor I'd noticed at Kudu Coffee months ago. His empire of secrets had shrunk to a bulletin board and a Sharpie. I watched a moment, then walked past. Boots clicking on wet pavement, neither of them raised their eyes. That was irony enough. Later that afternoon, Noah called from the shipyard. I could hear the forklift backup beeping behind him. Laughter from the crew. Dad, he said between chuckles, pallet busted on Bay 3, flour everywhere. Looks like it snowed in Savannah. His voice carried something I hadn't heard in months. Lightness, honest messes, fixable. At home that evening, I hung my jacket on the peg by the door. The brass hook where the spare key belonged gleamed, the key hanging there steady, untouched. I didn't lift it, didn't test its weight. Some proofs don't need retesting once you've learned the cost. I poured myself a glass of tea, sat on the porch swing, and let the house creak under me. The river rolled its slow sermon, gulls crying overhead. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. The trust was safe. The company was steady. My son was still by my side. And those who had tried to turn paper into lies were left to live in the thin margins of their own choices. That was the final irony. Not flames, not fury, but the stillness of boundaries holding. I whispered into the dusk, words for myself, for my mother, for anyone who Seps ever held a promise tighter than fear. We didn't burn the house. We let the truth keep it standing. And then I let the swing rock, the tea cool, and the paper rest.